So many male subs complain that there's not very many female dominants and that ratio of subs to doms works against them. So let's take a look at what's really going on here. Hey guys, it's Morgan with BDSM Relationships and Education. Thank you very much for checking out this video. Today we're going to be talking about the ratio of female dominance to male submissives. So if that's something you're interested in, then stick around and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Click the subscription button below and the little bell next to it, and that way you will know when I post new videos. So please also consider coming to join us on Patreon. Thankfully, we've got a number of amazing patrons who support this channel, and it's because of them that I can keep making videos. So definitely check us out over on Patreon and consider supporting the channel that way. So today we're going to talk about the ratio of doms to subs, and specifically I'm talking about female dominance and male submissives, and I know that there are all kinds of other configurations, you know, that this is a very small part of BDSM, but it is, you know, a part of BDSM that I'm involved in, being a female dominant, and it's something that gets talked a lot about in female dom and male sub circles. So again, if you spend any amount of time in the female dom male sub world, either online or in person or any of that, you are going to find that a lot of the male subs complain that there are not enough female doms to go around, basically. And it is a huge topic of debate online. Like, I mean, I can't remember a time in one of the Femdom forums that there's been like a couple of days go by without somebody bringing up the ratio. And I mean, it's so well known as a problem or whatever that all you have to say is the ratio, and everyone knows exactly what you're talking about. So it is something that gets talked about a lot. So I want to address this because I don't think that it is nearly as bad as the perception is. Now, if you are only online, I think that you are definitely going to not agree with me there. Because online, yeah, it does seem really, really skewed. So, but in real life, it's definitely less, or even goes the other way at times. So let's take a look at a couple of different things that are contributing to the ratio, which I, for some reason, can't say without making a face and being like, the ratio. So just deal with that. But anyways, it's one of those, depends on your perspective, I suppose. So if you are looking online, yes, there are a ton of people who identify as a male submissive, especially on sites like FetLife and Color Space and Alt and all that. So, I mean, there's a ton of them. However, a lot of them aren't actually male submissives. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, some of them are, you know, those guys that hear that kinky chicks are easy, and you'll get laid if you go and pretend to be kinky or whatever. So they try out the male dom thing, and that doesn't work out very well for them because female subs are actually looking for a male dom, not a guy that just, you know, thinks that a blowjob is kinky or whatever. And so then they're like, well, maybe I could try this like male sub thing and maybe like I'd get laid then, you know. And so then they try that out, and again they're like, yeah, well, I mean, giving oral sex to a woman is totally kinky, right? And they're not into any of the other stuff. So, I mean, they're not genuinely into BDSM a lot of the time. They're not into power exchange. They're not even into like kinky sex activities a lot of the time. So, they don't do well. And, you know, they're internet fuckboys, and everyone pretty much ignores them, except that they're really, really loud and vocal. Like, they make a lot of noise, and they're the ones that often will just, like, spam dominant women or submissive women or women in general with 1,001 messages, and we get really frustrated because it's usually, like, I mean, you know, crude things or whatever. So that can be a problem. Now, there is another group of people identifying as male submissives that are really truly fall into that category of submission fetishist or bottom or whatever, but they don't understand that nowadays there is that distinction between bottom and sub. And so somebody who identifies as a bottom or is a submission fetishist really should be looking for a top or a switch, or somebody that is more interested in those types of activities, as opposed to a dominant woman who is usually looking for some degree of power exchange and then maybe some kinky activities on top of that, but the focus tends to be more power exchange relationships. So again, that's sort of like splitting hairs a little bit, but if you are a guy that prefers just bottoming to activities, that doesn't actually want to give up any power or authority, then you would do yourself a favor and look for a bottom, or look for rather a top, a service top, a person who identifies as a top. If you're a masochist, look for a sadist, those kind of things. And don't discount switches by any stretch. They can be a lot of fun. So, switch top bottom switches as opposed to DS switches, but I think that is going to be a much more fruitful pursuit, instead of pursuing dominant women who are after a different thing, and your needs are not going to align very well. So the first thing we need to really look at when we're looking online is simply that there are more men than women on dating sites in general. And then there are more men than women on fetish or sex sites. So things like FetLife, which is not a dating site, but it is a kink site. There's going to be more men than women on those kind of sites. That is just the way the cookie crumbles. In fact, there are generally more people who identify as men online than there are women, or people who identify as women online. There's a million and one reasons for that. I'm not going to get into all of it, but that is the way it is. There are tend to be more men than women online in general. So of course, when we get down to niche sites like FetLife or Collar Space or whatever, we're going to see that ratio just even worse. Now, if you go out to an event, things get a little different. I have been to events where there have been very few male submissives. In fact, I've been to an event, I met one of my former partners this way, where I was pretty much the only female dominant. There was lots of switches there, but I was the only just plain old dominant there, and he was the only male submissive that came out. There was, I think, the odd male switch, but not very many, and he was the only male sub. So it was kind of like a bit of a default that we ended up chatting and whatever, and we hit it off. And I mean, obviously, we didn't get together because we were the only ones and had no other choice, but that's how we initially got talking, and then we discovered that we had a lot in common, and we got along, and what have you. So it happens sometimes. Now, I found that at specific femdom events, you will get more male submissives showing up, but only if they're play events, usually. So if it's an event where guys think they can get some play and some action, then they're much more likely to show up. But if it is like a munch, even if it's, femdom male sub-oriented munch, you're going to get many, many fewer guys showing up for that because, I don't know, they just don't come out to it as often. Now, if you are one of the ones who show up to those kind of events, you are head and shoulders above the rest, because that's where you get a chance to actually talk to the women and get to know them and have them get to know you. And for most dominant women, that's going to be a big thing. We want to get to know people. I hear the dog coming. Hi, Wolfgar. You smell. Did you fart? You stinky, stinky dog. So why do we end up with this ratio, especially online? Well, let's take a look at a few of the reasons. Now, online, dominant women, or women in general, really tend to get inundated with messages from men. And often they're really crude and crass messages from men. Now, this, of course, is multiplied like by a million when you're on a site that is seen as a sex site. So sites like FetLife or Collar Space, those kind of things. And if they are obviously women, so if they have that, you know, F on their profile, if they have a profile photo that shows that they are, you know, feminine or a woman, things like that. And of course, then it's even worse if they're under the 30 to 35 range. Not to say that women over 35 don't also get a ton of those messages, but the younger ones tend to get even more. And of course, if they are conventionally attractive, well, then all bets are off, and I wouldn't even want to see that inbox. No thanks. There are some advantages to being a bit older and a freaky chick, I'm telling you right now. So online, a lot of women hide one or more of these things, right? So they will hide the fact, they will put, you know, an avatar that doesn't show that they're a woman, that it's maybe, you know, just like a flogger or something, so that it's gender neutral. They'll take that gender designation off of their profile. They'll have a name that's not obviously a female name. I've even known some male photographers who used a photo of a female model as their profile picture to get all of these disgusting messages from guys, because they didn't even look to see that there was an M next to their name. Because these guys didn't even stop to look to see that there was an M on their profile. They just saw the picture of a woman, assumed that it was a woman's profile, and started sending gross messages. So I don't know about other women, but some that I've talked to feel the same way. But I personally avoid posting on websites like FetLife a lot of the time, because every time I post, I am guaranteed to get 3 or 5 just disgusting messages that I don't want. Now, one of the other problems I think that comes, that adds to the ratio, is that femdom porn is really appealing to a lot of men, and not very appealing at all to most women. So a lot of women will hesitate to call themselves a dominant woman because they've seen some of this porn and they don't identify with it. So you guys know what I'm talking about, the porn where the woman like seems to absolutely hate the guy. She's beating him, she's insulting him, she's calling him every name in the book, he's a worthless worm and all this other stuff, but then for some reason she still gives him a hand job and, you know, gets him off at the end. I don't know why you would do that for someone you hate. It's confusing, and I don't understand it. But that's the way a lot of femdom porn goes. Now, I know that obviously not all femdom porn is like that, and I highly recommend, if you're into more realistic stuff, to look at the amateur stuff. I love Clips for Sale. I don't know that I should say that on YouTube, but whatever. But you can find more realistic portrayals of female domination and topping on that site. So a lot of women just, they see that and they're like, well, I must not be a dominant woman because I don't want to do any of those things. Like, I want to do this with my boyfriend or my husband, and I love him. I don't hate him, and I don't want to call him names and make fun of him, and I don't want to tell him that he's got a small dick because he doesn't, or, you know, whatever. It's just, those kind of things don't appeal to a lot of women, and so they don't think that they are, you know, a real dominant woman because of it. So the other thing too, and I think this is part of why you don't see a lot of younger women identifying as dominant, is that we are really taught to be, you know, pleasing and nice and not bossy and not bitchy as we're growing up, and our ideas of dominance can often, again from that porn influence, be of a bitchy, domineering, bossy woman. So we don't want to be like that. I mean, we've been taught all of our lives that we should be nice, not, you know, like that. So it takes a while to sort of, first off, recognize that you don't need to be that porn stereotype, but also that, you know, you can be dominant and still be nice. And it's just sort of a bit of that sort of internal struggle that a lot of women go through. Certainly not all of them. There are some young women that know that they're dominant. I knew that I was dominant from a very young age, but I think that a lot of them, there is a bit of a struggle. Another thing that I see happening a lot more nowadays too is that a lot of young women decide to explore as switches. And I think that that's a great idea if it works for them, where they can sort of try out both sides of the slash. And they don't want to commit necessarily to one or the other, because why commit to one if you don't have to? If you're into both, then explore both. And I think that it's, I see a lot more young men doing the same thing, also exploring as switches. And I think that that's fantastic, because it allows people to see both sides of the slash. Again, it's not something that would have worked for me necessarily, but if it works for you, I think that it's a great way to go. But I also find a lot of submissive men that only want a dominant woman. They wouldn't be interested in a switch. They don't like the idea that she may have submitted to somebody else, and they don't like the idea that of switching at all. I've dated men who are like, oh yeah, no, I really like that you're a dominant only, because I don't think that I could date you if you had submitted to somebody else, kind of thing. And it's like, I did a bit of experimenting. I never really submitted, but I've bottomed, and so it's it's like, oh, well, I guess I can't tell them that I've done that before, as far as exploring kink goes. So I think in the end, it's all about compatibility, right? It doesn't matter if there's a million female dominants out there. If you're not compatible with them, it doesn't matter. So the appropriate approach is going to be to just approach dominant women, as people, with respect, and not as a fetish delivery system. And if you can show that you stand out from the crowd of all of the fuckboys. So it's not hard. You just have to treat us with respect and, as an actual human being. That's going to put you head and shoulders above everybody else. If you come out to the munches and the non-play activities where, you actually get to talk to people as people, you're going to get a lot further, and you're really going to, show yourself to be somebody of value and somebody that dominant women want to get to know. I know that there are lots of, submissive men out there that I've met at various events that I wouldn't necessarily play with myself because we just didn't have that chemistry or attraction or whatever, but I would recommend them to play with my friends, and I have set them up to play with some of my friends before. So, getting to know everybody is a good thing, and getting to know the freaky looking girl or the older woman or the, whatever, even if she's not your idea of who you're looking for, she has friends, and she might have a friend that is what you're looking for. So yeah, just treating dominant women, as people, will get you a long ways, and they will help you get over that ratio that is somewhat debatable. I mean, I agree. I think that there is a bit of a skewed ratio, but I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as most people seem to think it is. I've heard people say, oh, it's 50 to 1 or 100 to 1 or whatever. I don't think it's that bad. I think that there are probably somewhat equal numbers of dominant women to actual submissive men. I just think that a lot of other people classify themselves as submissive when they probably shouldn't. Again, if you're a bottom, looking for a top will get you a lot further. Anyways, guys, that is my opinion. I know I've been asked about that a couple of times. I will post an article that I wrote a while ago on Patreon for you guys if you want to take a look at it. It'll be on my website when I finally get around to putting my website up again. That may be a few months. But anyways, I'll link it when it's up and the puppy wants to say hi again. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next video. Say goodbye, Wolfgar. Bye, guys.